This is a video for Jacobstown Baptist Church to help them be able to have a general idea of the things that we do in the Philippines. And that's important for them to know because they have been with us for 22 years, encouraging us, supporting us, helping us through some hard times when others abandon us. And so I just wanted to take some time to show them what's going on, especially for the new people that attend there. We are called Timothy Mission, as you see in the middle of the screen. We chose that name because we wanted to follow the biblical model of missions, and that was where Paul went out and taught the people about Christ and would take some folks and help them learn to be pastors and plant churches. And Timothy was his first student, and so we thought it was appropriate to call the mission Timothy Mission. We serve alongside of Johnny and Friends International Disability Ministry. We are ministry associates with them. That simply means that we have a memorandum of agreement with them, that we can help each other out in the ministries that we do, a synergistic like arrangement. The memorandum of agreement helps us have the understanding that we are agreeable on doctrine and that we hold to the same standards for accountability financially. We also serve alongside of CBM Children's Bible Ministries. They helped us with the Home for Disability Children, and we'll explain that down the road. We work with a group called PREACH, the Philippine Reformed Evangelical Association of Churches. Good bunch of guys. They are not hyper-Calvinistic Reformed pastors, but they do hold to the 5 solas, which are a good guideline to how to handle the scriptures. And we are serving through Central Missionary Clearinghouse. It's a missionary agency, not a missionary board. Mission boards take 30% sometimes, or even a little bit more, of the money that comes in for a missionary to do ministry, and they use it for their own purposes in maintaining headquarters. Whereas mission agencies just help as a clearinghouse to provide financial accountability for the funds and to provide tax-deductible receipts for donors if they should so choose to do that. And they only take $2.50 for every check that they process. That's the only income they take away from the missionaries. We serve in the Philippines. You can see that on the bottom left side of the screen. Over 7,000 islands, over 170 different dialects. We started out where you see the red dot on the island of Mindanao, doing ministry there for a while. And then we felt led to separate from that original ministry, and we ended up moving forward to this island called Mindoro, where the real work of Timothy Mission began. Our purpose statement is to train, equip, and assist indigenous pastors to plant churches, to reach their people with the gospel through the teaching of sound doctrine, to minister, to evangelize, and disciple the poor, orphaned, and disabled, and to equip churches and individuals in the Philippines and the USA to do likewise, to partner with other ministries of like doctrine when appropriate to facilitate accomplishing our purpose. And I just want you to take a moment to see this picture and the next two and just stick them in your mind for a minute. This is in Manila, all these 3 pictures that you're going to see. If you go to Manila, put on blinders and walk around, you could almost think you're in the USA. But if you take the blinders off and look around, it's a completely different story. A huge mall called the Mall of Asia, much like the Mall of America out in the Midwest. We do pastor training, and I was blessed to have a providential meeting with Pastor Leo Ordiales. He has a doctorate from a seminary in the Philippines, The thesis for his doctorate was planting churches in rural Philippines, something like that with the title. And the reason I say it was a providential meeting, I was coming back on a boat from Mindoro to the main island, and that was from the city of Calapan, which is not a tourist attraction. Most of the people coming across from Mindoro are coming from a couple of white beach resorts that are in the north part of the island. So I was the only puti on the boat, puti meaning white, that's how they call us sometimes. And so he just surmised that I must be a missionary. And he came up to me and said, "Sir, are you a missionary?" I said, "Yeah." We struck up a conversation. It struck up a long friendship. He's been working together with me for many, many years now. We help each other in ministry. And this is a picture of him teaching some of the classes that we've worked together to see that he could get to and work with. And this is just an example of a typical class. The classes are in theology, hermeneutics, sometimes book studies, and about 2 or 3 times a year there's a batch like this that has gone through training and are sent back to their respective churches, and it enhances their ministry very much, and they are always seeking this kind of training. Within church planning, these men that you see in this upper picture here are my barkada, my buddies, my gang. We've worked together now for a while, and Timothy Mission works most closely with these gentlemen in planning churches, and Timothy Mission has worked to train these people in the how to be a pastor, how to know the word well. If you know the word well, the rest comes naturally. Going from right to left, there's Edward Marahan, and he's the pastor of Saved by Christ Church. That's the first church we helped Pastor Rio to establish. Next to him is Joey Hilado. He's a few months older than me, but he still calls me Dad. Anyhow, we've worked together from all the way back in the beginning. He's a dear, dear friend. Next to him is Mario Buntag, and he's an elder, and he is pastoring to the Mangyungs and evangelizing to the Mangyung tribes, and he goes up to the mountains from where his tribe is now located to try to reach those in the mountains. However, that's not always easy, because up in the mountains are the communist rebels, and sometimes firefights break out between the Philippine army and them. Then there's Pastor Ordiales. He had gathered these guys together for some teaching. And then next to him is Wesley, and he's an elder that is now pastoring church that we started in Santa Isabel. Next to him is Leo's driver. Don't know his name, but a guy that just came along to help Leo in his travels. Then there's Darwin, and Darwin is an elder in Mala Limnasapa. That's another church that's begun out of our work, grown from the original church. And then Juanito is an elder at Santa Isabel again, and he's doing outreach at a place called San Pedro. They're trying to start another church. Santa Isabel is trying to start another church. At the bottom on the left, you see Glenda Rio. She is the widow of Pastor Will Rio. He's the young man we worked with to start the first church, to help him start the first church, which is called Saved by Christ Church. She didn't be broken when her husband passed away. In fact, she steeled her heart up to service, and she has done a great job. She's the administrator of the first church, and she is responsible for the outreach to the Mangyung tribes and to the teaching of the children of how to read. She helps the mothers learn health care, child care. She just does a fantastic job. Pastor Sonny has been with us all the way from the start. Pastor Sonny, Pastor Rio, and myself were kind of like the three musketeers, and he loves to go around and help get churches started. He'll do, as you see in this picture on the right, he'll just stop by and strike up conversations with people, sit down, play his guitar, eventually start talking of spiritual things and bringing out his Bible and sharing. And over time, these little gatherings get larger and larger, and finally there's a church, and finally we need to supply him with a pastor, and that's how the men showed up to the churches that I mentioned in the previous video. Either it was Pastor Sonny that went around and did that, or other people from the existing churches. This is the original church of Saved by Christ Church. It's a residence on top for the farmer, and down below a bodega, they call it, a storage place for rice when it's harvested. And the bottom suited quite well as a church for a time, but then the number of people attending, we kind of outgrew it. It was used by the Japanese in World War II as headquarters for the occupying forces there on the island of Mindoro. But at one point, JBC finally got its boots on the ground, besides just kicking me out of the country and sending me over there, and my wife as well, Judy. The DeMarcos on the left, they did a lot of counseling, praying with people, encouraging them, just getting to be friendly with them and letting them know that we loved them. And Pastor DeMarco also did some preaching while we were there. Caitlin DeMarco and Molly Black in the middle there, they spent time with the kids and did Sunday school lessons or VBS-like lessons. On the right is a disobedient Molly. There's a delicacy there, at least the folks there feel it's a delicacy, where they take a fertilized egg, a duck egg, and they let it grow, and then they put it in the ground for a few months. And eventually they dig it up, they open it up, and they eat the contents. And I'm not lying, it's the truth. That's what they do. But I advise these people not to partake of the balut, is what they call it. Apparently, one day when Molly was not within my eyesight, she went ahead and tried it. I didn't scold her. She's in a new culture, experiencing new things. Maybe good for her. I just have never been brave enough to do it. This is a picture of Pastor Rio. And what the JBC folks would do is we went around to different villages. We'd set up and put on a little presentation where there would be music, testimonies, and it would end up with Pastor Rio giving a message. And it was just to try to be an outreach. But this particular place, this lot, was the one that Pastor Rio and I were praying for, that God would help us have in some way, so that we would have a place to build a church. We were asking for two things: the ability to have land and the ability to build a church. Those prayers were answered. This is that very land that we were praying for. And this is a church that came. We did not pay 1 penny for this church, neither did Jacobstown. This church was put there by a ministry out of South Korea. And the story is that one day we were sitting and praying, Pastor Rio and I, asking for land, asking for a church. And this Korean gentleman walks up the lane and stops in front of where we were and said to Pastor Rio, he said, "Are you Pastor Rio?" And of course he said yes. And he said, "We've heard about your ministry. We have a ministry that builds new churches for brand new ministries, and that's what we're going to do for you." We were floored. We couldn't believe it, but maybe we should, because God does anything. He miraculously provided this church and this land. And this is the first actual real church belonging to the Saved by Christ group of churches. And then Ed got his turn to get into the Philippines. Here he's speaking at the 7th anniversary of Saved by Christ Church. And here he has the privilege and honor. He was asked to baptize these group of people. This group of people are Mangyongs. They're tribe people when they first came to the area off the mountains to avoid the combat that was going on up there between the communist and the Philippine army. They didn't realize that clothing was not optional. But they learned a lot of things, and most of all, they learned the scripture. And as a result, they wanted to be baptized. And so Ed got the chance to baptize what, from my understanding, is the first batch of Mangyong tribesmen ever to be baptized on the whole island. And that began the tribal ministry. This tribe came down off the mountain to avoid the conflict that was going on. And they would start taking sticks and building their homes, more or less the homes like you see in these pictures, anywhere they found space. Well, that space usually belonged to some rice farmer, and he would come and chase them away. And so the tribe started getting more and more scattered, and the chief was kind of upset, of course, because his tribe wasn't together. And so Ed understood this situation. When he heard about this situation, he used the funds that the church gave him for everyday use while he was in the Philippines, and he gave it all over to buy land so that the tribesmen could have a piece of ground that belonged to Saved by Christ Church, where they could build a village and not be chased away. And from that, it has gone on to great growth for these people in their spiritual knowledge and in their knowledge of everyday life. And the children have been able to go to school, mostly taught by Glenda and some other members of the church. So they learn to read, and now they can read the Bible, and they're asking for Bibles all the time for more and more individuals in the tribe. But then the day came when, after all of Ed's successes, he became a street person. No, not really. He was just exhausted on the flight home and was taking a well-deserved nap. But the enemy, Satan, sent enemies that sometimes makes it difficult to do ministry there in the Philippines. In the bottom picture, that's a group of Muslims, one of 3 different militant Muslim groups that are on the island of Mindanao, where we first started ministry. And then on the top are some children that are part of the New People's Army, the communist military. And they're in many places around the Philippines, and they're particularly strong or thick there on the island of Mindanao, or Mindoro, I'm sorry, where we are now. And the thing is, you can see from these pictures, they don't care if they recruit kids. They recruit kids and train them and make them part of the forces that they use to attack the Philippine army, to attack police stations, to go in and shoot up mayor's offices in municipalities. And they train the kids to do this. We also have disability ministry, and besides the pastor training and church planting. And this is what we take as being called the Luke 14 mandate. That's what the Johnny and Friends ministry calls it. It says, go out quickly into the streets and the alleys of the town and bring bring the poor, the crippled, and the blind, the lame. Sir, the servant said, what you ordered has been done, but there is still room. Then the master told his servant, go out to the streets and the roads, the countryside, and make them come in so that my house may be full. We take that as a mandate to have outreach, deliberate outreach to people that are disabled. One way we do that stateside is we participate with Wheels for the World, a Johnny and Friends ministry. We collect used wheelchairs We put out notices in the newspaper and advertising that we're going to have a wheelchair collection on a certain day. If you have any old wheelchair in the back of the garage or up in the attic, and there are a lot of those all over the country, bring them to whatever church is sponsoring the pickup that day. And in this case, in our little town where I live, we got 200 wheelchairs. These collections go on all over the country, but the ones that are done in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, the next thing that happens to them is they are taken to Graterford Prison outside of Philadelphia, where the inmates have been trained on how to refurbish wheelchairs no matter how beat up they are. And they do a very good job, and the wheelchairs are returned to just excellent condition. Next thing happens to the wheelchair is they get loaded on a whole container load on a ship, and they're taken to a country where access to wheelchairs is limited, if there is any access at all. And we connect with a church over there that has a good solid pastor, and what happens is a day comes when a team from the States catches up with a container, and there's 1 or 2 days of distributing wheelchairs to the people that need them. And they'll just hand them a wheelchair. Physical therapists, nurses go along, and mechanics go along, and with the advice of the nurses and the physical therapists, the mechanics do work on the chairs and make adjustments so that there's the right fit for the right person, and depending on their disability, there's sometimes some other things added to the wheelchair. And they're also followed up with hearing a message about the gospel, and each person also receives a Bible in their language. In the Philippines, it's easier to just go buy wheelchairs. It's not like all those other countries where there's hardly any access. If funds are supplied, we are able to just go to stores and purchase wheelchairs for people. However, the best way that we have access to is at this place you see on the right that's known as the House with No Steps. And there, a person can go, and their disability and needs because of the disability are evaluated, and their size is measured up, and then they make from the ground up a customized wheelchair particular for that person, their size, their weight, and their need. This boy is Kim, like in Rudyard Kipling's story of Kim. He's got the same name. So he is one of the students or occupants of the Home for Disabled Children that God helped Judy and I to establish there in the Philippines. Not all of the children that come have to take wheelchairs. Some with surgery are able to be freed from a wheelchair. And this little girl here, you're seeing her use a walker after surgery to start to begin to learn how to walk. And the building that you see her walking towards and going into is the Home for Disabled Children that JBC helped us be able to put there.
Sige, lakad ka.
At the age she is here, she had never been to school yet, because her mother, like so many other children there that are disabled, just put her in the back room of the house, and she never went anywhere and never did anything. But we talked with the mother, and she was willing to let her come and stay at the home. And then we provided the surgery so that she could start to walk. And here you see her doing a pretty good job as a beginner. And she also is now going to school. You're hearing New Zealand accents and Filipino accents there. Got a lot of Kiwi friends now that I've started this.
find the left right leg.
Now, the ability to get this home put here, very similar to God when he stepped in and gave us a church. We were trying to put this home on Mindoro, and there were multiple obstacles. Difficulty finding land, and difficulty finding licensed social workers, which the government wisely required to be part of this team. We couldn't get anybody to come down from Manila and to live in rural Philippines and serve as a social worker. So I had heard about the Hebron compound where Children's Bible Ministries operates. They built a compound, they have an orphanage on it, and they had a school on it, Christian school. And I heard they were doing outreach to the community around the compound for disabled people. So I thought, okay, Lord, you're not helping me get this building up. So perhaps you want me to do disability ministry a different way. So I went to visit Hebron and just see how they did disability ministry, figuring maybe I could duplicate it on the other island of Mindoro. I went, they showed me around, they explained their work, and we sat down for dinner. And at dinner, they asked me, well, just what is it you want to do? What is your plan? What was your vision? So I explained how we really wanted to have a home for disabled kids, and rescue these kids from the back rooms of their homes, get them out into life and get them into school, that sort of thing. But I explained how we had nothing but obstacles, no lands, no social worker. And they just kind of nodded their heads, so that's interesting. Then when the meal was done, I went out and was talking to some of the men, the Filipino men there, and it's easy to have quickly to build friendships with the people there. So we were just sitting around talking with the new batch of men that I met. And then the director of the compound came walking down the lane and walked up to me and said, come here, I want to show you something. So I followed him, and he took me to this empty lot that was between the orphanage and the school. He said, that'd be a good place to put a home for disabled kids, wouldn't it? And I said, well, yeah. He says, well, if you want it, it's yours. Boom, just like that. Just like the Korean came in, boom, there it was. That's the way God works sometimes. People think he doesn't answer prayers sometimes, but if it's his will, it happens. So they gave us the land, and the director also said to me, you don't need to look for a social worker. We got one right across there at the orphanage, and what's a few more folders for her to deal with? So we'll just share the social worker. They asked us to show us how the building should be set up. They asked us to explain and teach what they needed to know about caring for the kids. And the rest is history. We did those things. We taught them those things. We worked with them on the drawings for the building, and now the home is there. But I'd like to show you where these kids come from. We rescue them from various kinds of homes. This is one of the kinds of homes. They're just living in the shelter of a culvert. They have, you can see if you look in there, they got some belongings stacked up in the back, a little bit of food, and this is where they live. Can you imagine living in this kind of condition and being disabled as well? And Smoky Mountain is a very famous place in Manila. Everybody knows about Smoky Mountain. And that's where the people that live there in those shelters I just showed you, it's where they go to get their groceries. The city dump. And I'm telling you the truth. They go there, they find chicken breasts, chicken legs, ribs, pieces of bone with meat. All of it is just leftover bone with little pieces of meat stuck to it here and there. They collect it, they take it back to the shelter, they peel all the meat off the bones, put it in a pot, put it in water, and they boil it forever. And after forever is done and they've boiled and boiled and boiled it, then they have it for dinner. That's the truth. It's why when people like myself and most other missionaries, uh, we don't always explain it, but sometimes when we come back to the States, we have a hard time uh, not getting along with, but tolerating some of the complaining and fussing that Americans have over how hard and difficult it is because I have to wear a mask, for example. People in the States have no clue what it's like. At least most people in the States don't have any clue. Some of the kids, after a happy day of rooting for dinner, this girl makes charcoal. That's her responsibility in the family. They make charcoal out of coconut shells. And when they get the charcoal made, then that's what they use to cook their food. They'll boil that water over top of charcoal made out of coconut shells. But can you imagine going home from work and there's no shower and there's no bathtub? All you got is a bucket and a spigot nearby maybe to try to scrub the poor kid down and rinse her off. But just so that you don't end up at the end of the video or end of the slide series here bummed out, let me show you this. This is the girl that was using the walker. She's on her way to school. Now, I'll admit her gait is a little off right now, but since this video was made, she's continued to practice, continued to get PT, and now if we could have a video available right now, you would see that she walks much, much better than this. Is going to school, is back home with mom. Mom had been connected with a pastor in a church in her community, and things are just going well.
Padala mo na lang yung gamit mo.
This is Old Testament scripture in Deuteronomy. It's just one of many, many scriptures that tell us that we're supposed to have some compassion and care and help the poor and the orphan, the disabled, the marginalized people in the world, both in the States and overseas. So it says, if there is a poor man among your brothers in any of the towns of the land that the Lord your God is giving you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward your poor brother. Rather, be open-handed and freely lend him whatever he needs. Give generously to him and do so without a grudging heart. Then because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in everything you put your hand to. There will always be poor people in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed toward your brothers and toward the poor and the needy in your land. So obviously, God wants us to do those things. But I'd like to read you this set of verses, but after I have edited them, because I'm reading it in such a way that it definitely applies to Jacobstown Church. There is a poor man among your brothers in the towns of the land that the Lord your God gave you. You, Jacobstown Church, were not hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward your brother. Rather, you were open-handed and freely gave him whatever he needed. You gave generously to him and did so without a grudging heart. Then, because of this, the Lord your God blessed you in all your work and in everything you put your hand to. That blessing being, of course, seeing fruit from your service to the folks in the Philippines. There will always be poor in the land. Therefore, I commend you for being open-handed toward your brothers and toward the poor and needy in your world. It's been a roller coaster ride the past 22 years, but it's been well worth it. And the partnership we have with Jacobstown Church has just been amazing. God provided you guys for us. You backed us up. You never gave up on us. You've helped us in so many ways. And you can see from this series of pictures here, the fruit that has come from your sacrifice and for your caring enough to help us be able to go and do the things that God wanted us to do. So thank you is nothing. It's just two words. It doesn't even come close to how much we have appreciated the help from Jacobstown Church.